Welcome to In Her Voice, a podcast created for women who listen to and live by their deepest wisdom, their inner voice. This was made for you, the woman who feels pulled to more, to lead, to create, to dream, and to be a world changer. My name is Kelly Covert, and I am an inner voice coach. Join me here each week as we explore what it means to reach for your inspired potential, all while honoring your worthiness each and every day. Oh, hey there. This is Kelly, and you are listening to In Her Voice. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for showing up, for saying to yourself that you matter enough to give yourself exactly what you need. Because when you listen to this, that's what you're saying. I have a fantastic guest on today, my friend Veronica Perretti, and we are kicking off a month of talking about practice. Different ways to practice, different practices, what practice looks like, what practice means. And I'm excited to bring you this full month talking about one of my favorite things. And also to kick off the month, I am doing another 5 days of journaling challenge. So beginning September 9th, we are going to be doing together 5 days of journaling on inspired potential. This will be the third round of journaling on these prompts this year, and I love returning back to them because so much can be found each time we do it. And so if you were in my May challenge, you are already in this challenge, so no need to register again. But if you were not in the May challenge, or you've never done a journaling challenge with me, or it's been a while, you definitely need to go register again. And you can do that at kellycover.com/journal. And this is 100% free. It's 5 days of kickstarting your practice of journaling, of connecting with your inner voice, and of making a commitment to yourself to live in an aligned way by listening to your inner voice, by listening to what she has to say. So I really hope that you will join me and everyone else that's doing it. It's going to be a really great time. Again, the URL is, I can't talk today. All of my words just got mixed up. You can register at kellycover.com/journal. So let me tell you really quick about my guest, Veronica. Veronica Perretti is an astrologer by day and a yoga teacher by night. After years of seeking outside experts and healers to fix her, she turned to her chart to heal herself. Veronica lives in New York City with her honey and her kitty kids, Rama and Zorro. She's an Aries with a Virgo moon, obsessed with KonMari and Bravo TV. You can tune into her weekly Essential Astrocast on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more about Veronica and book an astrology reading at veronicaperretti.com. And what we're really digging into today, on top of this whole thing that astrology is, which is a big bite to chew, we're talking specifically about new moon and full moon rituals and practices. And I love this because it's a way to track where we are and to set intentions and to let things go. So let's get right to the interview with Veronica Perretti. Well, hello there, Veronica Perretti. Thank you for being on In Her Voice today.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm super stoked about this conversation. I've been thinking a lot about it since we connected in our little Zoom coffee the other day. And today we're going to really be digging into the idea of using practices in your life to connect with your intuition, and also coupling that with an area of expertise of yours, and that is astrology. And so I want to start with sort of this idea of how do we possibly listen to our intuition and use astrology at the same time? Because I think when a lot of people think of astrology, they think of it as like, you go read your horoscope and it says what's going to happen to you that day, and then boom, it's done. So it's, they either believe it or they don't, and there's not a lot of room in there for listening to your intuition.
Yeah, so I personally take a very I don't know if you want to say Western view or progressive view of astrology, that these things, there are certainly things in your chart that point to fate, destiny, fated events, your life path, of course, right? But we all have free will. So we all make choices. And the astrology can be a really great way to help you reflect on your choices and to make better choices going forward. So if I, for example, this week that we're speaking, we have the sun conjunct Venus. This is an incredible time to take a look at what you love, how you want to be loved. It's also a great time to look at what you value because Venus rules money. It it rules what we value in the material realm, but it also rules what we value in the people that we spend time with. So,
Mm.
really, to me, astrology is much more about, posing questions based on what the planets are guiding us to look at, whether that's on a monthly basis, whether that's through your birth chart, whether that's through a weekly basis, whether that's following the moon. However you want to do it, however often or not often you want to tap into it. So maybe you're a person that wants to follow every week and journal daily. Maybe you're a person that wants to check in every new moon. I think there's really an opening for everyone in terms of how deep they want to go astrologically. But whoever you are and however deep you want to go, the astrology really is an amazing tool to pull out questions for reflection.
Mm. I love that. So, can you give us some real time examples of what you mean by questions for reflection? Because already we're diving into the idea of practice, right? Like this
Mm-hmm.
is a practice that we can use to pay attention to how things are happening in our life. So, can you give me an example from your own life of how you use these questions of reflection?
Oh, sure. So, a small example would be this week, right? So I'm looking at what do I value? What do I want to make space for? Who do I want to make space for? What kind of people do I want to surround myself with? Where do I want to put my energy, right? What people drain me? What people fill me up? That's a small example based on this week's astrology. Bigger example is when I was leaving my job. So when I left my full-time corporate job, which was very comfortable and I could have stayed in for a long time, I definitely consulted the astrology as I started to get that whispering in my soul that it was time to move on. I really listened to that for a long time and followed the astrology, and one thing led to another. And inevitably, and you know this, I'm sure, from working with women in intuition, inevitably, whatever your intuition is telling you, the universe is going to do something to push you in that direction.
100%.
You're just waiting for some external force to make you do the thing you already want to do. So inevitably that happened, but it happened right with the eclipse season, right? So I made my decision when the eclipses were happening. And so we just went through eclipse season. It comes twice a year, and it usually is a time that illuminates something that either we don't want to deal with or it brings some information to light that helps us make a change or make a decision that perhaps we weren't prepared to make prior to. So eclipses generally are like these vortexes of space and time where massive change can occur or does occur just because everything kind of pulls together and just happens. And anyone that doesn't believe in astrology, like, you have an intense eclipse season, you become a believer. Because most people do have big, big shifts around eclipse season. So that's what happened for me. It was like eclipse season came, I made my decision. I didn't do it for another few months, but I was decision made and done
Mm-hmm.
and ready and preparing that exit plan. So it really can help you in terms of planning your life.
Right. So how much of it, of that decision, and we'll just talk about that decision because it's a really great example. How much of that decision do you feel like came through for you because you were reflecting on these questions versus what you saw happening in your chart?
So as again, like I said, I think it had everything to do with I already intuitively knew that it was my time to go. I
Mm-hmm.
already intuitively knew that while this could be a really comfortable thing that I wrote out until whatever ending came, right? Whether that would be, you know, being laid off or whether that would be never leaving. Some people never leave a corporate job, they stay forever and ever. So whatever that I knew the whisper in my soul was like, I know I'm not going to grow anymore here. And it was really about when is the right time to say goodbye.
Mm.
And so I
Mm-hmm.
think the astrology helped with figuring out the right time.
Yeah.
It was less about making the decision.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what I really hear you saying in all of this is that astrology can be a tool to support our intuition, just like, for example, the Enneagram, which is one of my favorite things to talk about ever, is a tool to help us understand who we are. So astrology can work in much the same way because, just like people who say it's a bunch of hoo-ha, but then you ask them what their sign is and they're a Gemini and they have all of the traits of a Gemini. There is something that is true that helps illuminate more of who you are and gives you a deeper understanding of who you are, like in a moment of time and through time. And I think that why not use that tool? It's one more tool that we have that we can access that's going to support us in listening to our inner voice, which insistently tells us what we need to be doing.
Exactly. It's so funny because people will be like, I don't believe in astrology, but I'm a Gemini.
Right.
And they have such ownership over it. And sometimes people, it's interesting. Sometimes people have such intense feelings around being belonging to those traits of the sign or not. Sometimes people will be like, it does not relate. I am coming to you for a reading because I am not a Gemini. None of that relates to me. And I always say everyone's birth chart is different. So your birth chart, astrology is so much more than your sun sign. And to really get a good idea of what you're working with in this lifetime, you've got to get a birth chart reading or you've got to look at your birth chart and study it because you are so much more than your sun sign. And the sun sign only shows you a sliver of that personality. There's so much more to it. And I find that when people have a chart reading, that's when the aha moment comes where all the pieces fit together. Like, yes, you are a Gemini, but because you have this, moon in Cancer, you are extraordinarily emotionally adept and you are not in your head. You're very much in your heart. There can be so many things that come together to make you you. And that's why the birth chart is like a fingerprint.
Mm.
No one's going to have the same exact one, except maybe if like you're a twin and you're born really close together and all of that's a whole other rabbit hole we could go down. But generally, you are going to have a fairly unique birth chart.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really where you kind of see all the pieces come together, which makes it so much more layered than something like the Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram or so many of these other personality tools, which I love. I love all of them. And we've spoken about this, Kelly. Like, I'm a junkie for a quiz.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you give me a personality quiz, I will take it. I love learning about myself, which is probably why I love astrology so much and have since I was a kid. And I think, so many of the things out there are predated by astrology. So much of this concept of archetype comes from that sun sign thing that we've all grown up with, reading our horoscope.
Yeah. So, you talk a lot about this, the sun sign, or you don't talk a lot about that, but like, that's what we know. I think like if you ask anybody what astrology is, they will say, well, I'm a Gemini, and I actually am a Gemini. That's why I'm just using that example. I'm a Gemini. And so, that's what it is. But a big piece of astrology and in general, like the things that happen the most are the movement of the moons
Yeah.
and the waning and the waxing of that. How does that happening, which is like every month, how does that affect us?
It affects us a lot. So I am a moon junkie. I love the moon. The moon is my favorite thing to know about a person. And the moon changes signs every roughly 2.5 days. And the moon obviously is very close to us, and it illuminates the dark and it rules the feminine. So the sun rules the masculine aspect of ourselves, and the moon rules the feminine side of ourselves, which is part of the reason I'm obsessed with it. But from an astrological perspective, where I'm looking at your chart, it's going to rule your emotions. It's going to rule how you react when you're stressed. It's going to rule how you want to be treated, and your idiosyncrasies. It's who you are when you go to bed at night, when like the part of you that only your immediate family sees or your partner sees. It rules who you are, right before you wake up in the morning. It's really like the most intimate part of ourselves. So to me, I joke about this. My sun is in Aries, my moon is in Virgo, and my rising is Aries. And if you look at my chart, I have a lot of Aries. And so people are like, oh my gosh, you're such an Aries, you so much Aries. But I don't really feel so Aries. You know what I mean? I feel very Virgo. The Virgo thing is so palpable for me. Now, it's really interesting. As an Aries, most of my best girlfriends are also Sun and Aries, which is coincidence, and or not. And I can't necessarily pinpoint when someone has a sun in Aries. When someone has a moon in Aries, I can see it from a mile away, because the moon rules your idiosyncrasies. It's like your little habits. It's the way you make your coffee, and it shows up in how you organize your closet, and it shows up in the little things that you do. So to me, that's the like really interesting thing. That's the thing that I want to get to. Um, I think the moon is really the exciting part of being in a relationship. And whenever you're in a relationship, whenever someone comes to me for synastry, so this would be, you meet a guy, you're dating, do you want to get married? We look at the two charts together, we call it synastry. And the first thing I look to is, are your moons compatible? Because that means you can live together or not
Interesting.
live together,
Yeah.
or maybe consciously uncouple and have a very, very unique relationship. And some people have very unique relationships. Some people don't necessarily live together or whatever it is. Some people have so many different relationships in this day and age. But generally, for traditional relationships, if you want to live with someone and spend, decades with them, we have to look at the moons and see if there is compatibility there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so it's so funny because, we're talking about the moon, and I think as women, we recognize that our emotions are integrally linked to our cycle, but that often our cycle itself is linked to the moon cycle. And if you track it, you will notice it starts to sync up. And if you're off sync a little bit, it can affect you in that way. So that leads me to think that if we are paying attention to when the full moon is happening and when the new moon is happening, there are certain things that we could do to really support us during those times, to help us get clarity around things, or like certain things that are going on. So why don't you share with us some of these new moon, full moon intentions, or, practices that we can really start to incorporate in our life to use the tool to use the full power that is available to us?
Sure. So you definitely can follow the new moon and the full moon regardless of your cycle, whether or not you have a cycle, you know.
Yeah.
But I do think it's interesting if you are a menstruating woman. I do recommend tracking your cycle along with the moon and just seeing what phases, you know, you go through, because traditionally we look at the moon this way. The new moon is a time of new beginnings, fresh starts, setting those intentions, working on this, that, or the other, right? So the new moon in Virgo, which we're going to have soon, the new moon in Virgo is likes to work hard, and it's detail oriented, and it's very concerned with physical health and the physical body and routine. So, you know, from a simple standpoint, you could say, okay, the new moon in Virgo, I'm going to set into action a clean eating routine. I'm going to give up sugar for the new moon in Virgo, or I'm going to use the new moon in Virgo to get clear on my exercise routine, or really try to get to the gym 3 days a week, or whatever it is, right? So you can use it in that really simple way of creating intentions that align with the energy of that sign.
It's
You
almost like New Year's every month.
It is like New Year's every month, and you don't have to do it that way. There's a few ways to do it. You know, one could be that you are working on one big thing for the year, or you've got one big thing in your life that you're focusing on, and maybe each new moon you're adding one piece to that puzzle. So it really depends. I think for me personally, the way I do it is I look at where the new moon is happening in my chart. So what house is it happening in? And that's what I focus on for that new moon. And sometimes it's really concrete, and sometimes it's really a feeling. It really depends. And there's some months that are better at it than others. You know, there's some months that I'm
Yeah.
just like, I don't even know what I'm working on right now.
Yeah.
But there are some months where it's really, really useful. But I will say, I keep a journal almost every day. And when I look back at my journal for the new and the full moon, it's really, really helpful to see how things have evolved. Having the marker is almost more important than how you do the practice, right? But
Yeah.
having some place that you're tracking it, having some place that you're writing it down, I think is really, really powerful, because then you can go back and reflect. One of my favorite things about the new moon is corresponding the new moon and the full moon 6 months later. So let's say the new moon in Virgo is coming, and you're like planting that seed of, I'm going to exercise 3 days a week. I keep telling myself I'm going to exercise and I don't do it. I'm going to find a yoga class that I like 3 days a week. I'm putting it in the calendar and I'm doing it. And I'm going to do it for 30 days. I'm going to see how it goes, right? It's so interesting to then look at your journal 6 months down the line at the full moon in Virgo and say, oh my God, I'm still doing it. I'm still taking that yoga class 3 days a week. Or, oh my God, what happened? I forgot that I was even interested in getting healthy. Like, you know, it's
Right.
just
Yeah.
interesting to have a tool to reflect on your life. And as we all know, the tool of reflect of once a year saying these are my intentions, these are my resolutions doesn't really work, because we don't have a way of keeping ourselves in check.
Right.
So the
Yeah.
astrology really is this amazing marker. Now, within the lunar cycle is new moon, then you have the first quarter moon, then you have the full moon, the last quarter moon, and then the next new moon. So your full moon is generally about releasing, letting go of something. Also, you can think of it as the full moon in the sky, which we're going to have this Thursday. You know, the full moon in the sky, it's illuminating the darkness. So, what is it illuminating for you? Is it illuminating something that it's time to release? Is it illuminating something that maybe you weren't seeing before? So, we can work with the full moon in either of those ways, but traditionally, people set intentions at the new moon and then they release at the full moon. I don't necessarily, I'm not so like, I don't know what the word is. I'm not so dogmatic about it.
Yeah, like rigid, like there's some
Yeah.
flexibility there for
I
you.
think it's more about the marker in time, you know. But generally what you want to do is you're building up energy between the new moon and the full moon. And then you start to the energy starts to wane between the full moon and the next new moon. And I would say the one thing that I really honor about the moon cycle for myself personally. So the new moon is what we call the day before the new moon, or the 2 days before the new moon are the dark of the moon. That means there's no light in the night sky. It's completely dark, right? Because the new moon you can't see anything.
Right.
So I think it's incredibly important as women to take that time to wind down, to go inward. I mean, you can imagine it. It's like that moment before you get your period, and you are like, what's wrong with me? Like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm like so irritated. Everybody's annoying. Like, get away from me. But that's kind of what it's like. It's that time where you're just like, I just want to be by myself. I just want to go and be quiet and not deal with the aggravations of the world. That's what the dark of the moon is, and the new moon. So it's interesting. A lot of people do a lot of new moon stuff before the new moon comes, especially in the yoga world, because I'm a yoga teacher. I feel like everyone's doing moon stuff now. But you don't really want to set those intentions before the new moon. You want to set the intentions after the new moon has come. Because when you're in the dark of the moon, that's really the time for going inward and reflecting on the moon cycle, the
Yeah.
30 days that has passed.
This is so fascinating. And what I love most about this, and you've said it a couple of times, and I'm just going to say it again because I think it's so helpful, is that what we're doing is we're using the natural cycles of the sky, of the moon in its journey from new moon to full moon and back again, to help us remember what life we want to be living, to help us remind ourselves to look back as we look forward, to really sort of give us that moment in time to say, take a breath, or move forward, or whatever. And so it doesn't have to be, you can use it as you want it. I mean, it doesn't have to be, oh, like you don't have to know what house that it's in. Like when you say that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I have no idea. But just the idea of like that, it's reflecting what I'm feeling and the energy of what I'm feeling, and that I can use that time to like respect that and to pay attention to it and to reflect. I love that so much because it's that constant reminder of the practice that we want to be in all the time.
Yes, I think that the takeaway for me about astrology is that it's a natural way of following the energy that we're collectively experiencing and harnessing that energy to create momentum in your life.
Say that again. That was really good.
If I can.
Okay.
So, for me personally, like how I feel about the astrology is that it is a natural way of following the energetic cycles that we're collectively experiencing, and then harnessing that energy so that we can create momentum in our life and take action. So and I'm always like, for me personally, the astrology is inspiring. It's inspiring to be like, okay, it's new moon in Virgo, and I'm gonna do it. I'm just gonna ride this wave, and I'm gonna start making that morning smoothie, and I'm gonna get off the sugar. Like, to me, it's inspiring to have this external force. And I feel like it's an easy external force to tap into because it's readily accessible to all of us. It's everywhere on the internet. You don't have to pay for it. You don't have to join a group. You can just follow the astrology on, whatever your favorite person to follow is.
Yeah. Veronica Perretti.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's my favorite person. Okay, so I love that you said that. Just I get this feeling like just allow it to inspire you, not even feeling like you have to look for inspiration. Like if you give it permission, like give yourself permission to be inspired by it. But then what about like when the astrology seems negative, like Mercury retrograde or something like
Okay.
that?
Well, firstly, I don't think Mercury retrograde is negative, but
Okay. Oh, I love this already.
that is like a demonization. So, whenever we listen, we live in a culture that really wants to make things good and bad, that really wants things to be binary. We really want things to be black, white, good, bad. People have a really hard time. I don't know if it was always like this or if it's just more evident to me in the culture we're living in now, but people seem to have a very hard time to hold paradox,
Yeah.
like really hard time. And so, not we're all going to experience loss. We're always going to experience negative things. It doesn't mean that there aren't lessons or growth to be had from them. And that's why I'm really wary to fortune tell or say things are fated. It's interesting because I just did a broadcast today where I was talking a lot about fate. But it's, I think that we like to demonize. I think it's a hard thing to say, but I think we do like to make things the bad guy because then we have something to blame.
Yeah. Bingo. Bingo.
And so Mercury retrograde is like, oh my God, I can be an asshole because Mercury retrograde. Like, the truth is, no, don't be an asshole because of Mercury retrograde. Like, the truth is, like, Mercury retrograde means that it happens 3 or 4 times a year. Mercury appears to be spinning backward from our vantage point on Earth. And it is because Mercury rules technology and communication, that generally there are these, like, haywire things that happen. And sometimes you're going to feel it more than others based on where it happens in your chart. It happened at the degree of my moon, my natal moon, the month that I was opening my yoga studio in 2011, and my laptop crashed.
Oh
like,
no.
and like that was like the moment I was like, if I didn't believe in Mercury retrograde, now I do. So there are times that it's going to really impact your chart, like it's going to go retrograde on your moon sign, and you're going to feel it. And there are many times you're like, you have no planets at that degree in that sign, and you're just like, I don't even know Mercury is retrograde. I don't even feel it.
Yeah.
So, I don't think it's a negative thing. I actually think when Mercury goes retro, when Mercury goes retrograde or seemingly is moving in reverse, it's a great time to review. It's a great time to reflect. It's a great time to slow down. I think one of the big, big, big benefits of astrology is inherently in all of it, it's telling us when to slow down. And in our culture today, other than going to a restorative yoga class, I'm not sure that there's anyone else telling you to slow down.
Yeah. And we need to tell ourselves that more. And we need to give ourselves permission to do it without feeling guilty.
Correct. And so
Because
when
it's,
Mercury goes retrograde, it's very funny. In the astrology circles, everyone's like, oh, Mercury went direct. Now I can't have an excuse for like doing nothing. So, so it's very funny. Like we find these ways to demonize these things, but the truth is, it's a really good opportunity to review. Listen, I just moved during Mercury retrograde. Like, I'm not scared to do things. Are there certain things I wouldn't do? I'll avoid them, but I don't ever let the astrology scare me. I actually was selling my apartment, and one of my astrology teachers was like, well, if you could wait till Jupiter goes direct. And I'm like, well, I can't. So I'm selling my apartment.
I have to live my life. Thank you
I was
very
like, I have to live
much.
my life. Like, I have to sell my apartment. So, I just think that don't let the astrology scare you. I think that's kind of an old fashioned way of thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Well, and, I think that if anything, our biggest takeaway from today is that this is a tool that you can use for reflection, for reminding yourself when to slow down, when to move forward, for just reminding yourself of the natural cycle of life, which we oftentimes neglect in this life, in the world that we live in. So if you are interested in learning more about your own chart, you can talk to Veronica about that. So Veronica, why don't you tell everyone how they can find you, how they can connect with you? Because I bet that there are some people, including me, who want to know more about this stuff.
Sure. So you can go to my website, veronicaperretti.com, and you can book a reading there with me. You can check out the weekly Essential Astrocast, which is my weekly live broadcast. It's on Instagram and Facebook, and it's a podcast, and it's on YouTube. You can pretty much catch it anywhere. So just search me, search my name or Essential Astrocast, and you will find it.
Yeah, and we'll have all of that, all the links to all of that on the show notes. And your Veronica Perretti, 2 R's, 2 T's, 2 E's, all
Yep.
of that on Instagram.
Yep. So at Veronica Perretti, my full name, nothing fancy, no spaces, no dots. And I do post on stories quite a bit, though less lately. But I go through phases. I often post about the moon and what's going on because the moon does change signs so frequently and does have a huge impact on our emotions and how we're feeling. So that's something that I post more on the day to day on Instagram stories so people can follow there as well.
Yeah, I love your Instagram stories. I always get good ideas of oil blends for certain times of the month from you too, which I really love.
Yeah, yeah, I love doing those essential oil
Yeah.
diffuser blends for the new and the full moon and sometimes other fun astrological happenings.
Yeah, it's excellent. So, Veronica, in your life right now, as you listen to your inner voice, what do you hear her saying to you?
Um, right now, I am hearing rest and space.
Rest and space. And even if the Mercury is not in retrograde, you're still going to do that, right?
Yes, yes. So, it's August in New York, so it's feeling a little bit more spacious. Since I live in New York City, and August is kind of when people empty out.
Yeah.
And yeah, that end of summer, it's so nice to sort of lean into that, whether or not the astrology, our astrology right now is ramping up, and we're getting a little bit more momentum coming. But I know my personal life, and this is for a lot of women out there, like you can follow the new moon and the full moon, but you also have to follow your cycle. And so you have to kind of know when, it's time to power down and when it's time to power up and follow that, whether it has to do with your cycle or just how you're feeling emotionally. But we recently moved, so this is a time of nesting for me, which is really important. And I had to pull back on some work commitments to make sure that we had the space and the time for that because to me personally, as a moon in Virgo, it's important for everything to be just right so that I can feel settled.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, congratulations on the move.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for being here today, for sharing your unique wisdom. I've never had anyone on in the whole 2.5 years of In Her Voice to talk about this. So I really, really appreciate you and appreciate the practices that you've shared with our listeners today. Thank you so much, Veronica.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Well, I have to be honest with you. I am not well versed in astrology, and that certainly piqued my curiosity to find more, to dig into more about my birth chart and especially my moon sign. I don't even know what it is. So I'm going to dig in, and I'd love it if you dig in too. Let me know. So I think we mentioned in the interview that I'm a Gemini. June 20th is my birthday. And I'm really, really interested to learn more about it. And it's just so fascinating to me how, like, it's so weird and so magical, but yet, like, so spot on. I don't even understand how that works. But, sometimes we don't really have to understand it fully to appreciate it. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this, and I hope that you put into practice some of the new moon and full moon practices and rituals that we talked about. And remember that our 5 days of journaling on Inspired Potential begin September 9th. So go ahead and get signed up over at kellycovert.com/journal. And you know what? If you are really enjoying this podcast and you are looking forward to the journaling challenge, do me a favor and share it with a friend. If you see me post about it over on Instagram, repost or share in your stories, because the more people that we have who are connected and aligned with their inner voice, the more people that we have living exactly the way they're supposed to be living, the more that we're going to do in this world and the better that we can serve in this world, because what you're doing matters and who you are being matters. You are worthy.